In 1969, on the buses was pure laughter, simple fun and instant fame. But as the years passed, the smiles faded and real life took its toll on the cast. Behind the jokes were stories of racism, painful childhoods, and sudden, tragic deaths. Join us as we uncover the truth and why their lives were far more heartbreaking than the characters they played. Roy Jensen, as Woody, the hardened biker in Every Which Way But Loose, was played by Roy Jensen. At 51 years old, he didn't fake menace. He embodied it with the stillness of a man who had already absorbed years of physical punishment. Woody moved like someone who knew pain intimately, not as performance, but as habit. The danger in his presence came from restraint, not noise. Born February 9, 1927, in Calgary, Alberta, Jensen's childhood was defined by displacement and labor rather than comfort. His family migrated south, and survival meant physical work, logging, construction, anything that paid. Football became both escape and discipline, demanding toughness while offering fleeting structure. By the time adulthood arrived, endurance had already replaced innocence. War and sport carved his body long before Hollywood ever noticed him. Military service during World War II hardened him further, and professional football in Canada taught him how disposable bodies could be. Acting arrived through stunt work, where risk paid better than dialogue. Films like Chinatown and Soylent Green gave him visibility, but rarely mercy. He was cast as muscle, threat, or obstacle, never relief. Marriage brought moments of grounding and fracture. His first marriage to Barbara Ann Dionysius ended in divorce, leaving him with children and emotional distance. Stability came later with Marina Petrova, who remained with him until the end. Still, the work was relentless, and cancer slowly replaced strength with fatigue, role by role, year by year. Sadly, Roy Jensen died at 80 years old on April 24, 2007 in Los Angeles, after a battle with cancer. He left behind an estimated net worth of $3 million, earned through decades of physical risk and uncredited endurance. His legacy isn't tied to stardom. It lives in the faces audiences instinctively feared behind them. William O'Connell as Elmo, the jittery biker in Every Which Way But Loose, was played by William O'Connell. At 48 years old, he turned weakness into tension, letting fear leak through every gesture. Elmo wasn't comic relief by design. He was a man constantly bracing for impact. The humor came from how close he always seemed to collapse. Born May 12, 1929, in Los Angeles, California, O'Connell's early life appeared stable on the surface, but discipline arrived through service rather than comfort. The Korean War introduced him to authority, obedience, and loss, shaping a personality that understood anxiety as survival. When he returned home, acting became a controlled way to express what couldn't be spoken. Hollywood quickly found a use for him. Nervous barbers, cornered clerks, uneasy authority figures, roles that mirrored a man permanently aware of consequences. Performances in High Plains. Drifter and Star Trek cemented his reputation as the face of quiet panic. Finally, William O'Connell died at 94 years old on January 15, 2024, at his home in Sherman Oaks from natural causes. With an estimated net worth of $1 million, his life closed gently, without spectacle. He left behind a body of work built on restraint, proof that fear, when played honestly, can be just as unforgettable as power. Bob Grant as Jack Harper. Jack Harper, the lecherous bus conductor in On the Buses, was played by Bob Grant. At 37 years old, he slipped into the role with an ease that made the character feel dangerously real. The laughter came fast and loud. What audiences never saw was how closely Jack's recklessness echoed the man behind him. Born Robert St. Clair Grant on April 14, 1932 in Hammersmith, London, he grew up in a family fractured early by divorce. Emotional instability replaced security, forcing him to mature quickly and help support his mother through odd jobs. That early sense of instability stayed with him, shaping a personality that craved validation yet feared failure. Even as he trained seriously at RADA and later proved his dramatic range in works like Sparrows Can't Sing, the pressure to succeed never loosened its grip. His professional life reached its peak with On the Buses, later reinforced by stage work and radio drama, but success came with a brutal cost. Typecasting closed doors instead of opening them, and steady work slowly vanished. Marriages followed one another under strain, first Jean Hyatt, then Christine Sally Kemp, and finally Kim Benwell, each relationship carrying the weight of financial anxiety and untreated mental illness. Public laughter masked private collapse. Depression deepened into bipolar disorder, and despair turned physical. A disappearance, a failed suicide attempt, then another. Friends drifted, the phone stopped ringing, and the man who once commanded audiences found himself alone with his thoughts. Sadly, Bob Grant died on the 8th of November 2003 at the age of 71 by carbon monoxide poisoning in his garage in Tewkesbury, Gloucestershire. The end came quietly, deliberately, and without rescue. His estimated net worth of around £500,000 told a painful story of earnings eroded by illness and instability. He left behind a legacy of laughter and a silence that followed too soon. Anna Karen as Olive Rudge. Olive Rudge, the shrill, sharp-tongued sister in On the Buses, was played by Anna Karen. At 33 years old, she infused the role with comic fury and aching insecurity. Her voice cut through scenes like a blade. Beneath the humor lived a rawness audiences sensed, but rarely named. Born Anne Harrison McCall on the 19th of September 1936 in Durban, South Africa, she spent her earliest years surrounded by poverty and racial tension. Migration to Britain brought safety, but not comfort, replacing one form of instability with another. She entered adulthood early, working in nightclubs and theater to survive, long before television recognition through projects such as Carry On Camping hinted at her comic strength. Reinvention became a necessity, not a choice. Her career flourished through On the Buses and later EastEnders, yet fame never insulated her from loss. Marriage to actor Terry Duggan offered stability until his death, leaving a void that never fully healed. Without children of her own, she poured herself into work and family bonds that slowly thinned with age. Each role carried both gratitude and exhaustion. Health issues followed, then isolation. A serious fall confined her. Mobility vanished, and appearances became rarer, even as her long-running presence in EastEnders kept her connected to the public she loved. Public affection remained, but daily life narrowed to quiet routines inside her Ilford home. Finally, Anna Karen died on February 22, 2022, at the age of 85, in a house fire at her home in Ilford, Greater London. The tragedy stunned those who remembered her fierce screen presence. Her estimated net worth of about £1.2 million reflected decades of steady work, yet could not shield her from a lonely end. She left behind characters still alive on screen, and a silence that burned far too brightly. Doris Hare as Mabel Mum Butler. Mabel Mum Butler, the sharp-tongued, domineering mother in On the Buses, was played by Doris Hare. At 64 years old, she embodied a woman whose authority filled every room she entered. Her presence felt immovable, almost intimidating. Yet beneath that iron composure lived a lifetime of exhaustion and sacrifice. Born Doris Bremer Hare on the 1st of March 1905 in Bargoed, Wales, she was raised inside a traveling theater family where stability barely existed. Childhood meant constant movement, missed schooling, and pressure to perform before she could fully understand the stage. Appearances in early revues and later productions like Words and Music hardened her quickly, shaping discipline at the cost of innocence. Marriage to John Fraser Roberts brought 2 children but little rest. Long tours, wartime performances, and emotional distance strained the relationship until it ended in divorce. Even as she joined elite institutions like the Royal Shakespeare Company, personal fulfillment remained elusive. Recognition arrived in fragments, including her MBE for wartime service. Age never slowed her dedication. Roles in On the Buses and later stage revivals, such as Valmouth, confirmed her influence on British comedy and musical theater. She continued performing into her late 80s, her voice steady even as her body weakened. Work became continuity, proof she still belonged in a world that rarely paused for reflection. Tragically, Doris Hare died on 30 May 2000 at the age of 95 from natural causes at Denville Hall in Northwood, London. Her estimated net worth of around £700,000 reflected a lifetime of steady, unglamorous labor. She left behind laughter shaped by endurance, and a legacy built on never stepping off stage. Michael Robbins as Arthur Rudge. Arthur Rudge, the bitter, sarcastic husband in On the Buses, was played by Michael Robbins. At 38 years old, he gave the character a sharp realism that cut through the comedy. His delivery carried resentment rather than farce. Audiences laughed, unaware how closely the role mirrored deeper fatigue. Born Michael Anthony Robbins on the 14th of November 1930 in London, his childhood unfolded during wartime Britain, marked by bombings, rationing, and uncertainty. Early work as a bank clerk offered security but no meaning, pushing him toward amateur theater as escape. Gradual recognition followed, reinforced by appearances in serious dramas like The Saint, where he proved depth beyond comedy. Discipline and faith shaped him early, anchoring a restless temperament. Marriage to actress Hal Dyer in 1960 provided rare stability, and together they raised a family while navigating the unpredictability of acting work. Robbins resisted being confined to one identity, balancing humor with weightier roles. Yet financial strain and health anxieties shadowed success, quietly narrowing his future. As illness crept in, work slowed. Even so, performances in films such as The Pink Panther Strikes Again and respected television dramas affirmed his versatility. Charity work and deep Catholic faith became emotional refuge, especially as cancer progressed. Sadly, Michael Robbins died on the 11th of December, 1992, at the age of 62, after a battle with prostate cancer in Caterham, Surrey. His estimated net worth of around £600,000 spoke to a solid but uncelebrated career. He left behind characters filled with bitterness and humor, and a quieter truth of resilience beneath the screen. Cicely Courtneidge as Mabel Mum Butler. Mabel Mum Butler, the sharp-eyed, domineering matriarch in On the Buses, was played by Cicely Courtneidge. At 76 years old, she brought to the role a lifetime of authority that no script could fake. Her presence was smaller than Doris Hare's later version, yet colder and more brittle. Viewers sensed instantly that this mum had lived longer, endured more, and forgiven almost nothing. Born Esmeralda Cicely Courtneidge on April 1, 1893 in Sydney, Australia, she was raised inside theater trunks rather than stable homes. Constant touring across Britain replaced schooling with experience, applause with discipline. By her teens, she was already a West End performer, and early success in Edwardian musical comedies shaped both her confidence and her reputation. Yet the collapse of her father's producing career forced her into music hall. Marriage to Jack Holbert in 1916 became one of British theatre's longest partnerships, professionally and personally. For more than 6 decades, they worked side by side, surviving war, financial disaster, and shifting tastes. While audiences adored her glamour, the private cost was constant performance, constant adaptation, and little separation between life and stage. Honors such as her later DBE recognized endurance as much as talent. In later years, she gravitated toward character work, proving her depth in serious roles such as The L-Shaped Room, which revealed a vulnerability audiences had rarely seen. Her brief appearance as Mum on the Buses carried that accumulated weight, authority sharpened by age, humor edged with fatigue. Even as her physical strength waned, her command of timing and silence remained intact. Cicely Courtneidge died on 26 April 1980 at the age of 87, from natural causes in a nursing home in Putney, London. Her estimated net worth of around £800,000 reflected decades of disciplined work rather than excess. She left behind a legacy built not on noise, but on survival, proof that longevity itself can become a performance. Terry Duggan as Nobby Nobby, the recurring working-class presence in On the Buses, was played by Terry Duggan. At around 37 years old, he slipped naturally into the world of depots, pubs, and everyday frustrations. His performances were smaller, but grounded. He felt like someone who truly belonged there. Born Terence A. Duggan on the 15th of April 1932 in London, his childhood was shaped by poverty and early responsibility. Work came before ambition, survival before dreams. Comedy grew out of observation, not privilege, later refined through variety stages and cabaret circuits. Appearances alongside working-class comedies, such as Are You Being Served?, reflected a performer rooted in lived experience rather than theatrical polish. Marriage to Anna Karen brought both partnership and stability, with the two often performing together on stage and screen. While never a leading star, Duggan built a steady career through supporting roles, physical comedy, and his well-known drunk sketches. Yet that reliability also meant anonymity. As television tastes changed, work slowed. He continued appearing in familiar series like EastEnders, maintaining relevance but not prominence. Health problems, particularly heart disease, began to narrow his world. The stage that once gave him purpose gradually fell away, leaving routine and illness in its place. Sadly, Terry Duggan died on May 1, 2008 at the age of 76, following heart-related illness in London. With an estimated net worth of around £300,000, his life reflected modest success earned honestly and spent carefully. He left behind no grand legacy, only the echo of a man who made working-class comedy feel real, because it was. Michael Sheard as general manager. The general manager, the rigid, distant authority figure in On the Buses, was played by Michael Sheard. At 35 years old, he stepped into the role with a cold precision that instantly set him apart. His presence was brief but unmistakable. Even in limited screen time, he radiated control and quiet menace. Born Michael Lawson Perkins on the 18th of June 1938 in Aberdeen, Scotland, he grew up in a household ruled by discipline. His father, a strict church minister, imposed order and moral rigidity that shaped Michael's inner world from childhood. Stability existed, but warmth was scarce, and pressure to conform ran deep. That upbringing forged the restrained intensity later visible in performances such as Doctor Who, where authority and threat became second nature. Marriage and family gave him personal grounding, yet his career gravitated repeatedly toward villains and enforcers. He became known for embodying fear through stillness rather than noise, a skill sharpened over years of repertory work. Though On the Buses placed him in comedy, his instincts remained dramatic, rooted in the same control that later defined his work in Grange Hill. The line between role and temperament blurred as authority followed him on screen. As time passed, science fiction and genre television widened his influence. Appearances in Doctor Who and later Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back exposed him to international audiences, turning him into a cult figure without ever making him a headline star. Convention halls replaced television studios, admiration replacing anonymity, even as illness quietly advanced. Michael Sheard died on 31st August 2005 at the age of 67 after a battle with cancer at his home on the Isle of Wight. He was laid to rest privately, surrounded by family rather than fans. His estimated net worth of around £500,000 reflected steady work rather than celebrity excess. He left behind a legacy of authority, men who ruled through fear while quietly losing his own final battle. Pat Ashton as Doreen, the lively, clippy presence in On the Buses, was played by Pat Ashton. At around 39 years old, she brought warmth and sharp Cockney energy into a world dominated by men. Her smile disarmed, her timing grounded scenes in reality. She felt instantly familiar, like someone audiences already knew. Born Patricia Ashton in 1931 in Wood Green, London, she entered working life early, shaped by post-war practicality rather than privilege. Training as a singer and tap dancer from childhood, she learned to survive on stage long before television offered stability. Touring reviews and later productions, such as Oh, What a Lovely War, hardened her professionalism while sharpening her comedic instincts. Marriage to Jeff Godwin and motherhood anchored her private life, even as work pulled her constantly away. She rarely headlined, instead becoming one of television's dependable faces, recognizable, trusted, and often overlooked. Roles multiplied across sitcoms, but typecasting kept her circling the same ground, applause steady but limited. As television comedy shifted, she adapted quietly. Appearances in shows like The Two Ronnies and continued work on stage preserved her connection to audiences, even as opportunities narrowed with age. The spotlight dimmed without warning, replaced by routine and distance from the industry she had served faithfully. Sadly, Pat Ashton died on 23 June 2013 at the age of 82 from natural causes in Diss, Norfolk. Her passing drew little public attention, despite decades of familiar presence on British screens. With an estimated net worth of around £200,000, her life reflected modest reward for relentless effort. She left behind not a legend, but something quieter and rarer, a sense of everyday authenticity that comedy cannot survive without. Larry Martyn as George, the quiet, easily overlooked presence in On the Buses, was played by Larry Martyn. At around 35 years old, he stepped into the role carrying a life already worn down by hardship. His performance never demanded attention, yet it lingered. Behind the ordinariness was a man already fighting battles no script revealed. Born Lawrence Martyn on 22 March 1934 in London, his childhood was shaped by instability and struggle. He grew up tough, learning early that survival came before comfort. Before acting ever became a profession, he served in the parachute regiment and even worked as a circus performer, experiences that hardened him physically while leaving emotional scars. Those rough beginnings fed naturally into later roles, including his understated work in Are You Being Served?, where quiet despair hid behind comedy. Marriage gave him structure, but security remained fragile. He worked constantly, moving from one supporting role to another, rarely given space to shine. Even when audiences recognized him from Are You Being Served?, the industry offered little permanence. He stayed reliable, adaptable, and mostly invisible, traits that kept him employed but rarely celebrated. As the years passed, illness crept in alongside fading opportunities. Cancer weakened him while work slowed, forcing him inward. Friends remembered a man still joking, still polite, yet increasingly tired. The silence after the laughter became heavier than the laughter itself. Sadly, Larry Martyn died on the 7th of August, 1994 at the age of 60 after battling cancer at his home in Kent. An inquest later returned an open verdict, adding uncertainty even to his final chapter. His estimated net worth of around £300,000 reflected decades of steady work without reward, befitting the effort. He left quietly, another familiar face gone before most realized how much pain had lived behind the smile. John Lyons as Bert, the younger, eager presence in On the Buses, was played by John Lyons. At 28 years old, he entered the series with ambitions still intact. His energy contrasted sharply with older cast members. It felt like the beginning of something, not the end. Born on the 14th of September 1943 in London, his childhood unfolded in the shadow of war. Bomb damage, rationing, and working-class pressure shaped his early years, forcing maturity long before adulthood. He left school young, worked manual jobs, and only later discovered acting through chance. Training disciplined his raw instinct, preparing him for television roles that soon followed, including A Family at War. Marriage and family brought stability he had never known as a child. Unlike many co-stars, his career expanded rather than contracted. Roles multiplied across television, each one slightly stronger than the last. Persistence paid off slowly, culminating in long-running success beyond comedy, particularly dramatic work that proved his range. Over time, he transitioned naturally from screen to stage, choosing longevity over fame. Theater tours replaced television contracts, and pantomime replaced sitcoms. While awards never arrived, respect did, earned quietly through consistency rather than spectacle. Now, John Lyons is 83 years old. He remains active in theater, occasional appearances, and speaking engagements, still grounded in the craft rather than celebrity. His estimated net worth of around £600,000 reflects a life of steady work and careful choices. Among a cast marked by tragedy, he stands as one of the few who survived the industry with both career and self intact. Sandra Bryant as Sandra, the bright modern face of On the Buses, was played by Sandra Bryant. At 27 years old, she entered the series with confidence that suggested momentum. Her presence felt contemporary. It hinted at a future that seemed wide open. Born on September 30th, 1945 in Edgware, Middlesex, her childhood was stable by post-war standards, free from the extremes that shaped many of her peers. Acting arrived early and naturally, supported rather than resisted. Television welcomed her look and timing, leading quickly to roles that placed her inside mainstream British comedy, including appearances later echoed by work like The Two Ronnies. Marriage brought balance, but it also narrowed her path. She chose family alongside her career, a decision that quietly reshaped her visibility. Roles became less frequent, then selective, until she slipped almost unnoticed from regular screens. The industry did not punish her. It simply moved on. What remained was memory rather than momentum. Viewers remembered the face even when they forgot the name. Years passed without scandal, comeback, or tragedy, just a gradual fade into normal life after early exposure. Today, Sandra Bryant is 81 years old. She lives privately, long removed from television schedules and casting calls. Her estimated net worth of around £500,000 reflects early success managed carefully rather than squandered. Among a cast often defined by loss, her story feels quieter and in its own way just as haunting. After 56 years, the laughter of On the Buses still echoes. But the lives behind it took paths few could have imagined. Some found peace, some were broken by silence, and others simply faded away as time moved on without them. So what surprised you the most about the cast's lives in 2026? The tragedy, the loneliness, or the quiet survival? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you want more deep dives into classic TV legends and what became of them, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story.